Welcome back to Specifically Solo. My name is Jared Boomer, and this is a channel where we review solo board games, talk about solo modes for games, and other solo related content. And today we are taking a look at the new Stonemaier game, Apiary. This is a very cool game where you play as a bee. And that's what happens in this game. So let's talk a little bit about Apiary and how it works. So it is a worker placement game at heart, where you're going to have bees, which I'll show you here in just a second, that are your workers, and you're going to be placing them out on a board. And as you place those bees out on the board, you will take actions at those various spaces. But also, one of the really cool things about Apiary is that your bees level up. So your bees might start at a level 1 or 2 and will work their way up all the way to a level 4. And as they get stronger, they're able to do better actions that are on the board. And in Apiary, none of the action spaces are ever blocked. You can always go to an action space and put a worker there, but if you do, you might bump an opponent's worker. And when that happens, they get to increase the strength of their worker or possibly hibernate their worker, which is going to allow them to score points or do a better action. So there's a lot of strategy involved with the bumping. And if you go to a spot trying to figure out if you want to go there to bump that worker because you really want to take that action, or if you don't want to go there because you don't want to get the other player, or in the case of the solo mode, the automa, getting stronger and being able to take better action. So it's a really cool dynamic that I haven't seen in a ton of board games that I've played in terms of the worker strength increasing. It also, none of the spots being blocked ever as well. So there's a lot of variability in this game. There's a lot of unique things that happen in terms of your hive mat and also your faction tile that you will get at the beginning of the game. So now let's take a look at the board and some of the components for Apiary and give you an overview of what it looks like when you play the game. Okay, so here we have a game of Apiary set up, and I'm not going to go over all the rules for this game, but I did want to give you a little bit of an overview of what happens during the game, and then we'll also look at just the solo only components that you use when you play against the automa for Apiary. So as I mentioned in the intro, Apiary is a worker placement game. Your workers are little bees, which are very cool. So you take these bees, you put them on various spots on the board, and all of those spots do different things. So here you have an explore action. You're going to move that ship around there, the queen ship, collect different resources. That's the main way of gathering resources in the game. You have your advance action, which is going to be used to place tiles on your board, which we'll look at here in just a second when we look at the player components and the solo components. You have carve down here, which is going to require a pretty strong worker to be able to do, but it's going to give you a really great tile that you're going to be able to use and get a lot of points out of. You have convert over here, which is the main way that you're going to convert your resources if you do need to switch resources out. You can also teach a dance that way as well, which allows you to do some more things with resources. Here on the grow space, you're going to be able to upgrade your faction tile, get your other worker. You start the game with one worker always over here, sometimes more depending on the faction. And then you also can add to your player board as well with that action here. Down here is the research action. This allows you to take cards that can give you benefits. They can also be used on your player board to give you in-game bonuses depending on if you work those things out. And then down here is the hibernation comb, where you will put your hibernated bees into, and it's kind of a little bit of an area majority thing going on with the scoring on how that hibernation comb works. And then around the exterior of the board, you have the score track, which goes all the way around over here. And then down here, you have the Queen's Favor track, and that is going to allow you to get some points as well, a different way to increase your victory points. So that's really it for Apiary. One of the things that I really like about this game is how compact this setup is. And again, we're going to look at the player components here in just a second, but it's not going to require a lot of space either. So if you don't have a huge table, this is going to work out just fine. This is on half of a standard folding table that I have, and it fits perfectly fine. In fact, you can see we've got a lot of room over here on this right side that we could set up more components or more things over there if we needed to, but we don't. It just doesn't take up a lot of space, which is really awesome. So one thing is this queen ship miniature. This does come standard in the game. This is not an upgrade at all, so you just get this with the game, which is really nice. And then also you have these wooden resources, and these come standard in the game as well, and they even provide this nice little tray. Of course, Stonemaier does a great job with their inserts and things and letting you pack stuff away really well, so that's a really nice thing too for the inserts. So now let's take a look at the player components and what you'll actually use when you're playing Apiary, and also what the solo mode will use and what you have to set up for that. Okay, so here you can see the starting player components for Apiary. This is what you would use in any game of this that you play, not just against a game against the Automa, but even if you're playing against other people, this is how you will always start in Apiary. So the first thing you have is, this is called your hive mat. You can see mine's called the Skeep. There's a lot of different ones in the game though, and one of the cool things about Apiary is that there's so much variability with how this could be set up that you could really have a lot of different starting options every time that you play this game, and the different mats are going to give you different things depending on when you cover up these spaces. So you can see this one gives you a lot of resources. This one over here, the Poppleton, gives you a lot of Queen's Favor and also some victory points. This is another one which kind of has a mixture of those things called the War, I believe, and that's going to give you some cards, also resources, Queen's Favor points. So there's lots of ways that you could start this game out when you are playing Apiary. So you get that, and then you're also going to get a faction tile, and there's a couple of different ones that you can choose from. You'll get 2 at the beginning of the game, and you can decide which one of those you want to choose. They also have starting faction tiles, which are a little bit easier to understand, but you can see here, this faction tile is called Pomon, and this is my starting faction tile, and it gives me 2 points per adjacent plant tile at the end of this game. The farm tiles that are in the game with the little plant icons, that's what that means. So you'll just pop your starting faction right down there, and then you can surround any of these spaces. So all of these things are different. Every faction starts differently, has different things that it may do. It may give you points in game, it may give you points at the end of the game, it may give you extra starting resources or different things that you can do throughout the game. So it's really nice. There's tons and tons and tons of these in the box. You could really, you know, it would take you a while to play through every single faction that comes with this game. I think there's 20 in the box for Apiary. So there's a lot of variability there with the factions and with the hive mat as well. And then you have what's called your docking mat over here. And this is where you're going to have your starting bees, and you'll see on your faction tile that it will tell you what you're going to start with worker-wise. So those are the strength that you will put your bees at. In fact, this one is actually incorrect here, so you would move that back to a 1. But on this particular faction, I would start with a strength 2, a strength 1, and a strength 1B. And then you have your hibernation tokens here, and also another cube here. And you have your landing area down here. You store tokens that you gather here, and it's got some other things on there that will help you out when you are playing the game. So those are the player components for Apiary. Now let's take a look at what the Automa will use when you play against it. Okay, so here is the Automa or the solo mode components for Apiary. It's very, very simple. In fact, the Automa actually comes with its own rule book as well, which is really nice. So this is just a couple of pages, and will give you all the instructions you need to play against the Automa when you play a game of Apiary. So you can see that the Automa has a docking mat as well, and it will use gray and yellow workers. So unfortunately, if you're a big fan of those colors, you won't be able to use them in this game of Apiary, because that's what the Automa uses when it is deciding what actions it will take. You can also see it has hibernation tokens. It has some things here on the board to remind you of what points it will score for tiles it gathers, and so on. And there are 6 different difficulty levels that you can play out with the Automa, which is really cool. So again, talking about the variability and talking about how things change up, there's a lot of options for Apiary when you play against the Automa. So this is set up for a level 2 game, just kind of a normal game against the Automa. It goes all the way up to 6 levels though, and you can also flip this on the back. And there's an expert mode for the Automa as well. And I've played a couple games against different levels. I played one game against a level 1 Automa and won that pretty easily. Level 2, I squeaked out a win, and then I played against level 4 and just absolutely got crushed. So it does scale up in difficulty pretty well, and that's also done by this gained worker strength right here, which is set to 2 for this game, but this tile is reversible and can also be set to 3, so then the workers would bump up faster and would also hibernate faster, so you theoretically have less turns to get things done in the game. So the other thing the automa is going to use is this deck of cards, and this is all it's going to need to know what actions it does. So you will flip one of these cards over, and you will look at the color on this card, and then at the action over here. So it will say to you, particularly on this card, if you have no gray or yellow workers or 1 gray or yellow workers, you will retrieve all of them and the automa will get 2 victory points. If they have a 4 strength worker, they will carve tile number 2, and we'll explain how that works here in a second. And then also they would explore if they have a 1, 2, 3 strength worker, or if they have a level 4 worker, they would do this particular action. So how the automa works is you will just go down that list there, and whatever you can do, that's the first action that you will take with the automa. One thing is this S curve, and you'll see this on all these cards in Apiary. So there's 2 different ways that the S curve could go. It could go like this, or it could go like that. And basically what that is showing is when you have to do something like select one of these tiles on the board, maybe you're moving the queen ship in a particular way, that is the way that you are going to move with that S curve. So there's a lot of great examples in the rule book for how this would work, depending on which way the S curve is going and where certain things are on the board. But like if we had this S curve up here, that just means it's going to move to the left, and then it's going to go back to, move up a row and then go back to the right and then go back to the left. This is the other way, where it would start at the top, work its way down, go over to the right, back to the left, and then down. So it's pretty easy to figure out. I would say this is probably the most complicated aspect of the solo mode, is just trying to figure out how this arrow works, this S curve works. At least for me, that's what I found was the most complicated thing, was trying to determine which way the things need to move on the board. So once you have that figured out, though, it's fairly easy. The automa turns are very quick, which I'm going to talk about more here in my likes for this game, and very easy to operate once you have that completely figured out. So that's all you need to run the solo for Apiary, is just that docking mat. It comes with its own automa docking mat, and then also this deck of cards right here. And again, you'll use this side to determine the color, this side to determine what action it takes. Going down that list, there's different actions. The automa will visit all the spots on the board throughout the game. If they bump you, just like in a regular game, get to increase your strength. If you bump them, that increases their strength. So there's definitely some strategy involved. So now let's head back and I'll tell you what I liked about this game and how well I think the solo mode works for Apiary. Okay, so we've taken a look at all the components for Apiary. We've gone over a little bit how the solo mode works, how your turn works as a player. Now let's get into some of the things that I really like about Apiary. And I think one of the first things, and I did a video recently on solo modes and what I think makes a good solo mode. And I think Apiary does a lot of the things in this game that I think make a really great solo mode. And one of those things is that it's very easy to operate. It is literally just flipping over a card, seeing what action the automa is going to take, and then putting a bee in that space, possibly collecting a tile or maybe changing 1 or 2 things on the board in terms of scoring. But it is very, very easy to operate the automa. And that is one thing that I love. I don't want the automa's turn to take longer than my turn does in a lot of cases. So in the case of Apiary, it is very, very quick. It is see what they're gonna do. Okay, I put your worker there. Maybe I get one of your workers back, or I bump one of my workers, and it goes very quickly, and that's a really great thing about Apiary. So I love how easy that solo mode is. One other thing that I love about Apiary is the solo rulebook. I think it's really smart to do a separate rulebook for the solo rules. And some games have this and some games don't. And I always appreciate when a game does have this because it allows you to reference things a lot easier. Maybe you have to look up a specific rule that only applies in the solo mode. Well, instead of going through this whole rule book, you can just pull out this separate rule book, look in there, and it's a lot easier to find what you need. So I love that about Apiary, that it has it's a separate rule book. It's a very well laid out rule book, very easy to understand how the solo mode operates. They tell you the solo mode is going to do some things differently than a regular player can do because it's got to be a little bit more powerful and it can do some actions that are a little bit different. But that's all outlined on the first page. Setup is very easy with the solo mode as well, so really enjoy both of those things. Another thing I really like about Apiary is the components. I think the components are so cool, especially those bees. Those bees are just really neat. I mean, they come in a bunch of different colors and they all have this like wash on them that is just standard in the game and kind of makes them look worn and weathered and a little rustic as well. And I think that's super cool. You know, Stonemaier usually tries to do some standout component in all of the games that they have. You know, in Wingspan, it's the eggs, and Viticulture, it's the glass beads, and Scythe, it's the mechs. There's things in every game, every Stonemaier game really, that kind of stand out. In this game for Apiary, it is definitely the bees. So I love that. I love picking those bees up, placing them on the board. They have such a good tactical feel. Of course, the wooden resources are also great as well. And the tiles are really nice quality. The cards are really nice quality too. So the board is double-sided. I haven't mentioned that yet, but if you were to play this against or with 4 or 5 people, you would flip the board over and it looks just ever so slightly different in terms of some of the spaces, and also the hibernation pods at the bottom of the board are laid out a little bit differently in terms of how that works. But nice dual-sided board, so that offers more variety if you're playing with multiple people. And the board quality is great too. The hive mats are really nice. The faction tiles are really nice. So yeah, overall, component-wise, it is a really solid game for a component standpoint. So some other things that I like about Apiary are just the decisions that it gives you. I mean, it allows you to do so many different things. One of the things that I really like is the fact that no worker spots are ever blocked. You can go wherever you want in the game. There's never a time where you have to say, the automa's there, I can't go there, I have to wait till they recollect their workers or the round resets or whatever the case may be before I can go take that action. Not in Apiary. You can go wherever you want in Apiary. It's just, if I go there, I might be increasing the strength of the automa. Do I want to do that? Do I want to allow them to possibly hibernate a worker or take a stronger action on the next turn when that card comes up that I draw? So all of that stuff really allows you to think with some strategy on what you want to do on your particular turn. And I love that all the spots are open. I think that's a really cool concept, and not a concept that you see in a ton of worker placement games. You know, normally there are going to be spots blocked off or places you can't go until you get a certain strength of worker or something like that. But in Apiary, that's not really the case, except with that carve action, you do have to have a strength 4 worker to go there. But everything else is open on the board. So love the worker placement and how that works in this game. Also, the tile laying is cool, how you're building out your hive mat and how the mat is getting bigger. And when you collect income, every time when you have to bring your workers back, when you have to retrieve them because you can't literally place any more of them out on the board, you might get to run some more things because you have more workers, or you might get a tile that gives you a one-time bonus, or maybe it's an in-game scoring bonus, or like I said, maybe it's an income thing that happens every once in a while. So that variability there, and the tile placement and figuring out where you want to put them and what things you want to cover up on your mat to gain that as well. It always feels good to place a tile in this game. You say, oh, I get to get this and also this, and then on a future turn, maybe I will get this, or at the end of the game, this is going to let me do this or score this many points. So that's a really cool feature of Apiary too. So I've been really enjoying this game overall. I think this is a really great worker placement game from Stonemaier Games. I think that the solo mode, like I've said, is really, really easy to operate and super duper simple. And I think that every time I play this, it will be a little bit different, just based on the fact that maybe I'll have a different starting hive mat that I use, or maybe I'll have a different faction that I randomly draw out of the box, or the tiles that are out at the beginning of the game on the advance action are going to be different. The carved tiles, I didn't mention this yet, but there's more of those in the box than you need for a particular game. So you're going to switch those out from game to game. These research cards, when you go to that space, and the plant cards, there's so many of those in the game that you're not going to see all of them. So you could play this a lot before you really get through everything that the game has to offer. And no two games of this are ever going to feel the same, which is a really unique aspect because, you know, sometimes you play things and you get in a pattern or in a stretch where you could kind of figure out how to beat the game, or you know you're going to start and you're going to do these three things, you know, on your first three turns. And Apiary is not like that. It is totally different every time you play based on what you're going to start with and your starting workers and the strength of those workers. So really love that variability, which I mentioned a few times in this review, but that's a really cool aspect of Apiary. So for me, this is a really solid Stonemaier game. I think if you could pick it up, definitely do that. There is room in the box, so it looks like there'd probably be an expansion at some point. If I had to guess, I would assume that that expansion might add, there's so much stuff they could add with an expansion. They could add more tiles, they could add more mats, they could add more factions, more cards, another part of the board. So there's lots of different things they could do with an expansion for this game. But I love the science fiction theme of this game. The bees thing is really interesting. And when I first heard about this and when I first got it, I thought, am I going to really enjoy that? You know, it's a science fiction game where you're bees and you're working on, you know, building your hive, and that just doesn't, the science fiction thing with the bees didn't seem to really click initially for me, but after playing it a bunch, it definitely does now, and I really love that aspect, and I think that's a really cool and unique theme that you don't, you know, there's not a lot of games out. There's a lot of science fiction games and a lot of space games for sure, but there's not a lot of those games that involve bees or a lot of games with bees in general. So very cool theming from Apiary, and I would highly recommend that you pick this one up if you can. Get it played, test it out. I think solo works really well. It's a really great solo mode in this game. Very easy, as I've already mentioned, and I think I'm going to be playing this one a lot. So Apiary is a solid game from Stonemaier Games. Check it out if you have the chance. Thanks so much for watching, specifically solo. We've got some other videos up that you can go check out. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. That definitely helps as well if you enjoyed the content. Check out some of the other videos which I have up here. I've got my Shelf of Shame for 2024, things I want to get played this year that I haven't played yet. And also I did a video on what makes a good solo mode, so check those both out as well. Until next time, this has been Jared. Thanks so much for watching.